Good evening and welcome to the Hairenik Media Newscast, bringing you the latest headlines from the homeland and the diaspora. Armenia and Azerbaijan have released the full text of the 17-article Agreement on the Establishment of Peace and Interstate Relations signed at the White House, exposing contentious provisions, particularly in Articles 4, 8, and 15. Article 4 obligates both parties to refrain from interfering in each other's internal affairs. However, Azerbaijan's demand that Armenia amend its constitution as a precondition for signing the agreement directly contradicts this provision. Armenia's prime minister and his allies deny that this constitutes interference. Meanwhile, Article 8 calls on both sides to condemn and combat intolerance, racial hatred, discrimination, separatism, violent extremism, and terrorism. While intended to promote peace and security, observers worry this clause could be used by Yerevan to restrict nationalist expression and silence dissent under the guise of fighting extremism. As for Article 15, it obliges both sides to withdraw from international legal cases and refrain from filing new ones, potentially undermining Armenia's access to international legal mechanisms. Armenian Minister of Territorial Administration David Khutatyan failed to clarify who will control the Azerbaijan-Nakhichevan transit route through Syunik, deferring the issue to future working groups. The vague response underscores the government's lack of preparedness on a key national matter. In contrast, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has clearly stated that Azerbaijanis should not encounter Armenian border guards along the route. U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce has praised the newly signed Armenia-Azerbaijan agreement as a historic achievement for President Trump, underscoring his key role in brokering the deal. Speaking at a press briefing in Washington, Bruce declined to speculate on how the U.S. might respond to potential interference from Russia or Iran in implementing the Trump route for international peace and prosperity.
I think no, I'm not going to speculate on what we may or may not do with certain actions. The world knows to take President Trump seriously. This arrangement, this deal is important to him. They were at the White House. This matters to this administration. It matters to the world. While many have tried, we have to say the Europeans, the French, and Putin and even Biden, only President Trump was able to successfully bring this these two countries together to agree to this historic peace. So I think what the world knows is that he is committed to long-standing, durable peace between countries, regardless of how long the conflicts have lasted or the hostility has lasted. And that commitment, as we've also seen, he's a realist. It's based in diplomacy, but he'll do what he needs to do to make the most of being the President of the United States.
Despite official praise, the agreement has drawn criticism from analysts and observers who see it as a one-sided process, with Azerbaijan acting as a post-war victor dictating terms. Critics argue that lasting peace cannot be achieved without mutual accountability, equal negotiations, and a serious acknowledgement of past aggression. Further deepening skepticism, many highlight Trump's inaction during the 44-day war in 2020, when Azerbaijan launched a full-scale assault on Artsakh, resulting in widespread violence and war crimes against Armenians. For critics, this context casts doubt on the sincerity and durability of the U.S. brokered peace, viewing it more as political theater than a foundation for true reconciliation. Catholicos Aram I of the Great House of Cilicia has called for the Washington agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan to be presented to the public with clarity and substance. Describing the deal as a unique development, he warned that any peace agreement involving one-sided concessions or ambiguous terms could pose serious dangers for Armenia. He stressed the importance of public involvement and cautioned against Armenia becoming a stage for geopolitical power struggles. Aram I also condemned Azerbaijan's anti-Armenian policies in Artsakh, demanded the return of Armenian prisoners, reaffirmed the right of displaced Artsakh Armenians to return to their homeland, and urged respect for international laws protecting churches. He emphasized the need for a balanced, interest-driven foreign policy that prioritizes long-term national interests over temporary gains. The Committee for the Defense of the Fundamental Rights of the Artsakh People voiced serious concerns over the August 8 trilateral talks and signed agreements in Washington, warning that lasting peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan is impossible without justice and the full restoration of Artsakh's rights. It condemned the termination of the OSCE Minsk Group's mandate as a unilateral and unjust attempt to dismantle an internationally recognized mechanism for resolving the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. The committee also criticized the omission of core issues such as the right of return for displaced Artsakh Armenians and the release of Armenian hostages, calling the approach appeasement that rewards aggression and risks fueling future conflict. Aliyev's special representative Elchin Amirbekov demanded that Armenia amend its constitution to remove territorial claims on Azerbaijan, intensifying concerns over power imbalance. Widely viewed as an infringement on Armenian sovereignty, the demand faces little resistance as Pashinyan's government plans to amend the constitution, specifically targeting references to the 1990 Declaration of Independence affirming Armenia's claim to Artsakh. With the region now under Azerbaijani occupation following the 2023 offensive, Yerevan sees this issue as a major obstacle to normalizing relations with Baku. Russia has signaled a cautious willingness to support the proposed Trump route transport corridor, with Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk stating that Moscow is prepared to back the initiative, provided Armenia considers it beneficial. He stressed the importance of aligning the plan with Armenia's obligations under the Eurasian Economic Union and the role of Russian border guards in Syunik, noting that some key issues with involved parties remain unresolved. Earlier last week, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan updated Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone on the Washington talks. According to the Kremlin, Putin reaffirmed Russia's support for the trilateral agreements reached between 2020 and 2022, which aim to normalize Armenia-Azerbaijan relations and reopen critical regional transport routes. However, not all Russian officials share a unified stance. Russian State Duma Defense Committee Deputy Chairman Alexei Zhuravlev harshly criticized Pashinyan, accusing him of voluntarily surrendering everything that many generations of Armenians have fought for. He said Pashinyan yielded to Western pressure by approving the Trump-backed corridor initiative without securing anything in return from either Baku or Washington. Prime Minister Pashinyan also briefed Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on the Washington talks. They discussed Armenia-Turkey relations and the implementation of previously reached agreements, despite none currently being in place. Pashinyan called the current atmosphere more favorable than ever for progress, and both sides agreed to continue active political dialogue. Amid growing regional tensions following the U.S.-brokered peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Iran has issued a firm warning against any actions that could threaten its national security. Senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader, Ali Akbar Velayati, stressed that the future of the region must be determined solely by its own countries and cautioned against foreign interference, which he said could further destabilize the South Caucasus. Any action that undermines our national security will receive an appropriate response, Velayati said during a meeting with Armenian Deputy Foreign Minister Vahan Kostanyan in Tehran. Kostanyan briefed Iranian officials on the outcomes of the Washington talks, reaffirming Armenia's strong ties with Iran and emphasizing that nothing would be allowed to jeopardize their historic relationship. Echoing Velayati's stance, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, in a phone call with Pashinyan, warned that the proposed corridor project must not be used to advance the hegemonic interests of foreign powers in the Caucasus under the guise of peacebuilding or economic cooperation. He called for unity between Tehran and Yerevan to safeguard their long-standing partnership. In response, Pashinyan assured Pezeshkian that any new regional communication routes would be based on the principles of territorial integrity, sovereignty, and reciprocity. While the Armenian government confirmed Pashinyan's remarks, it did not publicly respond to the Iranian president's warnings. President Pezeshkian has arrived in Yerevan today at the head of a high-ranking political and economic delegation. During the visit, the Iranian president is scheduled to hold talks with Armenian officials on bilateral ties as well as regional issues. Pezeshkian said his trip to Armenia comes as part of a broader initiative to strengthen Iran's relations with neighboring countries. Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand welcomed the Armenia-Azerbaijan agreements as a step toward lasting peace, emphasizing the need to resolve key issues such as the release of Armenian detainees, the safe and dignified return of displaced civilians, and the protection of cultural heritage. She reaffirmed Canada's support for peaceful solutions, respect for territorial integrity and self-determination, and pledged continued commitment to long-term peace, regional stability, and a negotiated political resolution to the conflict. Following the U.S. State Department 2024 Human Rights Report on Azerbaijan, the Armenian National Committee of America urged Washington to reinstate Section 907 restrictions, halt arms sales, impose global Magnitsky sanctions on Azerbaijani officials, and demand the release of Armenian POWs. Citing the report and UN and Freedom House findings, the ANCA highlighted Azerbaijan's engagement in arbitrary killings, torture, the ethnic cleansing of Armenians from Artsakh, destruction of Armenian heritage sites, and failure to punish perpetrators. ANCA condemned U.S. aid to Baku as rewarding atrocities and called for international accountability. Turning to developments in Armenia's legal system, the Court of Appeals has ruled that the arrest of businessman Samuel Karapetyan, owner of Armenian Electric Networks, and the search of his apartment were unlawful. Despite this, the Prosecutor General's office plans to appeal the rulings. Legal experts argue that in democratic systems, such decisions are typically upheld, but Armenia's judiciary continues to face criticism for political bias. In a separate ruling, the court extended Karapetyan's detention by 2 months. His legal team called the decision illogical and said it reflects a broader lack of justice in Armenia. They plan to appeal to the Criminal Court of Appeals. The Pan-Armenian Council for the Preservation of the Armenian Church condemned Judge Armine Meliksetyan's decision to extend Archbishop Mikhail Achabahian's detention by 10 days, denouncing it as arbitrariness disguised as justice. The council argued that pastoral speech is not a crime, warned that the detention is being used to silence criticism, and asserted that politicized courts erode public trust. Adding to the growing legal and political tensions, U.S. lawyer and lobbyist Robert Amsterdam has arrived in Yerevan to represent the Armenian Apostolic Church, which he says is facing a politically driven campaign by the government. His law firm stated that senior church leaders have been subjected to public vilification, legal harassment, and direct state interference in church affairs. Amsterdam also pointed to the case of businessman Samuel Karapetyan as evidence of politically motivated targeting by the authorities. The firm accused the Pashinyan government of executing a broader strategy aimed at weakening the church, silencing dissent, and suppressing fundamental freedoms such as religion and expression. The U.S. State Department's Human Rights Report criticizes the Armenian government for failing to consistently uphold the rule of law. Despite constitutional protections against arbitrary arrest and the right to challenge detention, the report cites cases of punitive detentions without formal charges and credible allegations of torture by government officials. It highlights a troubling year for Armenia, marked by mass displacement from Artsakh, rising reports of police abuse and torture, and ongoing concerns over judicial independence and arbitrary detention. While efforts to combat corruption continue, serious human rights violations persist, with few officials held accountable. In a troubling cultural blow, the Artsakh Ministry of Culture reported the complete destruction of 25 statues and busts in Stepanakert, honoring prominent figures who have shaped the cultural identity of Artsakh's capital for decades. Satellite images and Azerbaijani social media posts confirm the widespread demolition, which the ministry condemns as a blatant violation of international humanitarian and cultural protection laws, including UNESCO conventions and rulings by the International Court of Justice. Meanwhile, tensions along the Armenia-Azerbaijan border remain high, with satellite imagery revealing new Azerbaijani troop movements near Jermuk, despite official denials from Armenia's Ministry of Defense. According to Sputnik Armenia, the images show fresh Azerbaijani positions south of the Big Al and Small Al lakes and north of Jermuk, accompanied by engineering activity and increased drone surveillance. Armenian forces have reportedly responded by establishing new defensive positions, underscoring the fragile and volatile situation on the ground amid competing narratives. Armenia and the United States have launched their third annual joint military drill, Eagle Partner 2025, in Yerevan. Running until August 20, the exercise involves the Armenian Peacekeeping Brigade, the Kansas National Guard, and U.S. Army Europe and Africa. The drills focus on peacekeeping operations with a special emphasis on medical evacuation and improving interoperability and readiness for international missions. The Armenian National Committee of America welcomed U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen's strong advocacy for the Christian presence in Jerusalem, praising his recent letter to the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, calling for urgent American engagement to protect at-risk Christian communities, including the Armenian Apostolic Patriarchate. In his letter, Van Hollen cited threats like settler violence, property foreclosures, and legal attacks on church rights. ANCA called his advocacy vital to preserving Jerusalem's Armenian quarter and defending religious freedom. The Aram Manukyan Institute for Strategic Planning has released a new white paper titled Escalation of State Violence, Systematic Police Brutality in Armenia since 2023. The report outlines a troubling increase in excessive force, mass arbitrary detentions, and intimidation targeting peaceful demonstrators, journalists, clergy, and opposition figures. It highlights a shift toward more aggressive policing tactics and calls for urgent reforms to restore rights and public trust. For full analysis and concrete recommendations, visit the Institute's website at arammanukyaninstitute.org to read the complete paper. And now we're joined by Garen Mgrdician, a member of the ARF Armenia and a repatriate. Good evening, Mr. Mgrdician.
Good evening.
We recently witnessed the first court session of Archbishop Mikhail Azerbaijan, and tomorrow the legal proceedings against Archbishop Bagrat Galastanian are set to begin. In light of these developments, how do you interpret these trials against high-ranking figures of the Armenian Church? What do you think these legal actions signify within the broader political and social context in Armenia today?
It's actually quite distressing to see the footage of Archbishop Azerbaijan being in court, being dragged by Armenian policemen into the room and then afterwards out of the room. And I think this week also there's another session for Archbishop Bagrat Galastanian. It's really distressing to see our archbishops and our clergymen being held in custody in pre-trial detention in Armenia. This is something that I've never expected, but that's the reality of the situation on the ground in Armenia. We're increasingly going into an authoritarian kind of regime, and that is a direct function of, in my view, the current government regime in Armenia resorting to authoritarian ways to muzzle all dissent. In order to execute and realize a plan or a policy that is, in my view, totally against Armenia's interests and the interests of the Armenian nation. And the only way for them to be able to make progress on these policies is to either disorient people by manipulations and total blatant lies, or to try to bribe people through different methods and bonuses of government employees. And finally, the final resort is really to suppress all dissent and to put people in jail in order to try to muzzle all opposition.
Amid increasing concerns about Pashinyan's regime actively targeting and attacking the Armenian Church, how do you interpret this aggressive approach? What do you believe are the underlying motivations or objectives behind these actions against such a vital institution in Armenian society?
This is in line with what I said earlier. The Armenian Church, given that it's been an institution preserving Armenian identity and statehood for so long, is really naturally against the policies that go against the interests of the Armenian nation, especially so that the current government has already started to try to attack the fundamental issues like Armenians' identity, their history, trying to rewrite their history, trying to take away everything that symbolizes Armenia or Armenians for everyone across the world, like Ararat or the coat of arms, or our questioning the genocide or its veracity, or trying to understand what could have been the reason why we're interested in the topic of the Armenian genocide, right? And so the Armenian Church presents that the cornerstone of our identity, and it's also an institution that's spread across the world. It's got tremendous kind of influence over the Armenian people, and for good reason, and that's why in order to execute their in my view anti-Armenian policies, they need to try to weaken the Armenian Church. I'm confident that that's not going to happen because they're taking on the wrong target, to be honest, and they're going to fail in their quest to do so.
We remind our viewers that our guest tonight is member of ARF Armenia and repatriate Garen Mgurtician. Given the recent political developments and challenges in Armenia, how would you assess the current state of democracy in the country?
That's a funny question. Funny in the tragically funny, because if you hear media being financed by Western NGOs or Western governments, or if you listen to representative of Western democracies, you would have the impression that Armenia is a nascent democracy, it's thriving democracy, it's a bastion of democracy. The truth couldn't be nothing could have been further from the truth. It's actually we're going increasingly in an authoritarian kind of system where all dissent can be muzzled, where there's no rule of law. Technically, the legal system, the police really do everything, whatever is they're directed to do by the government and one person, the prime minister, technically, and that's done through nowadays Facebook posts of what to do with, let's say, Samuel Karapetyan or the archbishops. Or members of the ARF or members of different opposition movements. So it's ridiculous to talk about democracy in the current state of affairs in Armenia. But the positive thing is that we are seeing the emergence of local NGOs, truly committed, non-mercenary NGOs that are indigenous to Armenia. And they're just looking to protect the democracy, real democratic rights. And we're seeing a number of these NGOs becoming much more active, a number of lawyers and other activists becoming much more vocal about these abuses of human rights. And I think that'll be the cornerstone of what's to come, which is a really democratic and just system of governance in Armenia.
Mr. Mgurtician, given the significant social, economic, and political challenges our nation currently faces, concerns are mounting about the direction in which we are heading. From your perspective, where are we heading as a nation, and what actions must be undertaken to prevent a potential catastrophe?
It's actually, it can be very depressing to look at these things. To get a sense that there's no opposition, or we're not able to stop, the plans or the policies that are being executed by this regime and their foreign partners or foreign masters, to be honest. That's a better description of their role. The reality of that is, we have a long, millennia-old history. We have a strong identity. It's not going to be easy to kind of decimate Armenians' identity and to try to force us into capitulation in their example, because they can't protect Armenia, so they want us to believe that we're weak. They want us to convince that we should give up everything. I think increasingly the population of Armenia knows what's going on. And at the right time, through the right methods, either through elections or through a peaceful uprising, there's going to be change in Armenia, because we can't take this any longer as a nation.
That's all for tonight's broadcast. Thank you for joining, and don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. Good night.